Omari Evans is coming to Washington.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're coming to you on this special Wednesday edition, late at night here. I've actually got dinner cooking on the stove in the background here, Lars, because Omari Evans, Penn State wide receiver, is coming to Washington. And Lars, I don't know if this is necessarily an elite edition in terms of, he played at Penn State this past season and the tape might not be where it needs to be, but in terms of what Washington needs right now, this is perfect for Demond Williams.
And in a way, it's almost like, look at what Jeremiah Hunter and Demond were able to do in the last 2 or 3 games of the season, where he was able to find him and he was able to get production out of a veteran receiver. Yeah. That's basically what you're doing, and why it had to really be a 1 year. I mean, for all the upside that we talk about Johntay and his speed and top end, stuff like that, you're looking at the production. Yeah, it's not a guaranteed 1,000-yard receiver, but you don't really need that because of all the youth coming up in the room. And if Omari happens to only get, 30, 40 catches, so be it. Like, he's not going to be the one complaining like, wow, I came from Penn State, this pass-heavy offense, to now Washington, where I'm only getting 25, 30 targets or 30 catches. I don't think it's necessarily like that, but I do think you needed to get somebody else in that room with Denzel as an upperclassman to say, because you're losing Giles Jackson and Jeremiah Hunter. So you needed to get somebody else in that room just for 1 year. So like we said, it doesn't stunt anybody's growth. Right. And the other thing is, it actually encourages more 3 and 4 receiver sets, more so than what it did last year when you had really was Denzel and Giles or Jeremiah.
Right. So I like where you're going there. Just kind of spin around to make sure we get some background in on Omari Evans. Played 3 years, as you said, at Penn State last season, 415 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an offense that just didn't really use wide receivers. So it's nice to see him come to a much more receiver-friendly just offense for 1 year. And the more I look at this, the more I just say, okay, yeah, it's everything you just said, where it allows Demond to do so much more. And it doesn't put any pressure on somebody to step into that role where, I talked about Justice Williams on a show the other day, where that's a guy I really like. And I think that he's somebody who, the more I watch him, the more I say, yeah, he could be a breakout guy for sure. But Omari Evans isn't going to stunt his growth. Omari Evans is the perfect guy to complement everybody else in this room, where he can come in, and if he needs to be a wide receiver too, perfect. If he, comes in and Kevin Green and Demond Williams, all of a sudden they've got great chemistry, or Rashid Williams, whoever it might be, this doesn't preclude any of that. It doesn't say, okay, yeah, this is going to push somebody else out. This is going to do this. This is going to do that. No, it's just a perfect puzzle piece because if you want to really get into it, it also helps the tight ends too, because it doesn't take away targets from somebody like Decker DeGraff, who's a real, just a fun up and coming player. It just helps everybody out in exactly the way it needs to be.
And it also helps. I mean, I think Kevin Green kind of more in the slot, so I'd separate him a little bit. But you look at Audric Harris, you look at Justice Williams, and this is what I said originally when we talked, when I threw out his name when he first entered the portal, or reportedly was going to enter the portal, where you're adding another veteran presence, and that's no shot at Denzel. It's not saying, hey, you can't just rely on Denzel for that, but it's almost unfair to put that on just one guy, just putting it on just Denzel, or putting it on, and Kevin Green obviously will be a veteran in some respects, because he was able to play a little bit at Arizona, but since he didn't do much last season because of the injury, it's kind of, again, another unfair expectation to say, hey, you're now a veteran who the young guys should go to. Well, they can. But what's the harm in adding a third dude in that room? And I think, the way that I laid it out on Twitter was, if you go with a 3 receiver set of Kevin Green in the slot and Denzel and Evans on the outside, you still have Audric, Rashid, Marcus Harris, Justice Williams, all those guys still in the 2 deeps and getting snaps. And I think it's just going to come down to a matter of who's healthiest and, which matchups work the best. But you have a plethora of young talent. But like you said, you don't want to thrust that young talent into the limelight when, maybe, again, it would be the Rome Odunze situation where it gets, 10, 12 catches, and then cool, 20 catches the next year, 40 catches the year after that. And by your junior and senior year, you're ready to have a 50-plus, 60-plus catch type of season.
We've got more on Omari right after a quick break. because we've got a message from our good friends over at Prize Picks. This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yep, that's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm all about the hot takes this season. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at Josh Allen for more than 250 passing yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 70 rushing yards. It's fun to predict and easy to play. Plus, with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKDOWNCollege. Get $50 after your first $5 lineup. That's right, just $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. So, Lars, I want to talk about this in terms of looking at not just the 2025 season, but looking into 2026 as well, because it's something you and I talked about on the show the other day when we talked about Omari arriving for his visit. And that was, we look at the 2026 receiver class, you're probably going to take at least 3 guys, because I look at 2025 now and I say, it's going to be his last year in terms of eligibility. Denzel is probably going to head off to the NFL draft after the 2025 season. So if you end up taking 2, 3, 4 receivers in this 2026 class, it also just lines up really nicely for guys building around Damon Williams. And because that's what Jedd Fisch's whole plan is. It's about making sure he maximizes the time he has with Damon Williams. And so whether it be Kevin Green, Rashid Williams, I can't help but get really excited about what their future is, because I look at Omari Evans in kind of the same way that I think Garrett Hatchett came in, where it's in terms of, like you just said, it doesn't block anybody from getting snaps behind him, where, we're looking at this and let's just say it's week 6 and Omari Evans has been solid, but much like Damon Williams was with Will Rogers, where it's, hey, we can't ignore this guy behind him, so he needs to get more snaps. And it's nice to still have a guy like this in the rotation, but we also have this veteran guy who can really help out everybody else.
And on top of that, when you bring in 26 recruits and guys that are coming on visits between, by the time, I'm assuming he'll be here for spring camp. So you would assume those March, April, May, June visits, guys that are coming up from Texas, you now have another guy that can say, hey, I went to Penn State. They didn't really have a great passing offense, so I can do a pro-style passing offense, and I'm a Texas native, so I can tell you, hey, unless you're considering Penn State, which is another CFP contender, why not come to Washington? And I know it's not going to be a guaranteed, because you get a kid from Texas originally, that he's going to get a kid from Texas, but it just helps in the recruiting side of things too, where you can look and say, oh, cool, these guys can actually go and be developed from Texas up at Washington. You can go really wherever you are in the country and do it. Because again, much like, a lot of other positions nowadays, you can find most guys on the West Coast, especially skill position, but the better you can have a reach, and we see Texas prospects all the time pop off in the NFL. It's like, there's a reason why Texas is a hotbed for recruiting. And so anytime you can get a guy from Texas, similar to Jalen Polk, where look at the success you've had from guys from Texas at the receiver position who ended up transferring and ironically transferred from Texas Tech. So that's another feather in the cap to say, look, for all that Michael Crabtree and all those sort of things that Texas Tech has to offer, receivers are still picking Washington over Texas Tech, and that's another thing that Jedd can sell.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because Washington won out over Texas Tech. I believe Ole Miss and Tennessee were the other schools listed in his top 4. So it's nice to see that sort of victory on the recruiting trail. And Lars, I feel like we need to discuss this just in terms of what else he's going to bring, just as kind of a culture guy in the locker room, because after Johntay Cook was on campus for just 48 hours, that's something that needs to be mentioned. We'll get there right after a quick break, because we've got a message from our good friends over at Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 $25 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege with promo code SPACE80. Lars, the question that I want to pose to you here is the Johntay Cook thing obviously crashed and burned very, very quickly. Does this kind of right that wrong for Jedd Fisch in terms of just getting a needed veteran addition in the room and somebody who does have more on-field production than Cook as well?
Well, it's ironic because it's almost like Jedd had PTSD from the Jeremiah Hunter situation where you go and get a rather experienced guy from Cal and ends up having a career low in terms of yards, output, basically everything. And then he had a Washington. Now, again, how much of that was on Jeremiah? How much of that was on the scheme? Whatever you want to say. So then you go to the other side of the spectrum and say, you know what? We're going to take a guy who has 5-star potential, but hasn't really done much and kind of left his team in his last school and, not murky. Yeah, murky waters. We'll just call it murky waters. We don't really know what the reason was that he left Texas, but no, it was a mutual parting ways, similar to how it was at Washington. And then you look and say, okay, 5-star didn't work out. We still need a body. Let's just go and get, and by the way, this is what I said initially when he came out. Anybody that comes from James Franklin's program, I know you're a good player, and I know you're a good dude, a good person, where you're not going to disrupt the locker room. Like, there's no way you play at Penn State for 3 years if you're a locker room issue on any level.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where that's what this locker room really needed, just a more so wide receiver, where you've got, and it's something we've talked about before, where we're not knocking anybody's talent or anybody's character in that room. That's absolutely not the point of this, because we truly believe in everybody that is in that room right now. There's just no veteran presence, where the most you have of that is Denzel, and he's done a really nice job of stepping into that role. I want to be perfectly clear about that. But you want to get somebody who has so much more experience under his belt, where he did play 3 seasons at Penn State, has gotten meaningful snaps, especially this past year, but has done so in all 3 years. And that means something, where you've got all these young guys who for sure can absolutely explode down the line and be really promising players, whether you want to talk about Raiden Vinesbright, Chris Lawson, Audric Harris. All of these guys have that sort of potential down the line, but you need somebody else who has been, and especially, I want to take it a step further here. It's not just somebody who has that experience in the Big Ten, who's had to go, he's playing in the college football playoff semifinal this past season, where he's had to go to Ohio State. He's had to play a top 5 Ohio State team. He has all that just all those different little bits of experience that this roster really, really needs.
And the ironic part is nobody can be mad about he torched Washington in the game that he had. He actually had no targets and no catches, which is against Washington, but also that speaks to more about Notre Dame when you have Tyler Warren. You don't really need to do a ton of
that was more the offense
that's what I'm saying. It's more the offense, not because Omari wasn't a good receiver, wasn't able to get open. And I know some people have mentioned he had drops. He only had 4 drops in his entire career and 56 targets. I'm not worried about that. If it's like 8, 9, and you're talking about a multitude, yeah, that's maybe a little bit of a red flag. But I don't see any red flags in this. And one thing that's interesting, similar to Washington, where he played at Camp Randall this year, knows how to handle those type of environments. Similar to Giles when he was at Michigan, where maybe he didn't play or have record any stats in the game, but still the preparation, knowing, hey guys, when you go there, this is what you can expect, and especially as a veteran, because as I found out from Jedd Fisch, if you're a freshman and you got ties, I don't necessarily care right now. I want to hear from the veterans and the seniors, and so that's why, again, even more the reason you go and get a veteran to supplement that room, because you can lean on the young guys, that's fine, but it's almost in a way punting on the season where, hey, look, I'd rather, if he's the 85th guy on the roster, which obviously he's not, let's just run with the theory that, hey, this is the last guy we want to add to the roster for the time being. That's not going to be a detriment in any way, shape, or form. Like, you're looking at that saying high-end possibilities. If he ends up, let's say his final stat line is 35 catches for 370 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, that's fine. Because that likely means some of the young guys got more reps than we thought. And that doesn't mean he's bad. It just means like, hey, if the team is winning and they finish 8-4 or 9-3, and that's his stat line, no one's going to care. It's like, good. Got another veteran. Now he can go up to the NFL and say, hey, look, maybe if he ends up breaking in, that's a UW guy. Well, because again, he didn't do it at Penn State.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us for this bonus show. And if you like this, you join us for the first time, welcome. We do this every single day, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.